This is MacVoices TV. MacVoices TV is brought to you by Tropical Software, the makers of Top 10 Notes. Check it out at tropic4.com. Hi, this is Chuck Joyner, and this is MacVoices TV at Macworld Conference and Expo. We're in the SoftRAID booth talking to Mark James, the Vice President of Marketing for SoftRAID. Mark, welcome to MacVoices TV.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
So tell us about SoftRAID. You've got 4.0 version that you're showing at the show. What does SoftRAID offer to the consumer or the professional?
So what SoftRAID is, it's called RAID software. RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks, and the basic idea behind it is to give yourself a real-time backup of all your data. So you take your existing computer, you buy a second hard drive for it, and you do what's called mirror them together. And what happens is that your data, your volume, looks exactly the same, you use it exactly the same, it's one volume on your desktop, but underneath the hood, you actually have two drives that all data gets written to both drives. When you're reading data, all data gets read from both drives, so your reads are actually faster. The benefit for you is that, first, if a disk starts to fail, generally what happens if you're not using something like SoftRAID is you get a random crash, you get a freeze, something slows down, you have no idea what's going on, you'll buy Disk Warrior, you'll try to recover data, all of a sudden a disk fails. But it doesn't hand them randomly out of the blue, it happens because a disk starts generating disk errors, which macOS 10 doesn't show you. What SoftRAID does, it brings up a dialog box that says I/O error. You look in the system log, say, okay, it happened at 3 o'clock, another one happens at 4 o'clock. Go buy a new disk before it actually fails. And if the disk were to fail, the other disk automatically becomes the primary, takes over, and you're running. Zero downtime. Another nice thing you can do is have a third disk in your mirror that you keep off-site, and once a week or once a month you bring it in, connect a cable, and that's all you do. Keep on working, and in the background it does a rebuild, and when the whole process is done, at the end of the day, you unplug it, put it off in a safe deposit box again, and you have an off-site archive. And there's a lot more features to it, and the idea is that when all hell breaks loose, you want to have your data available now. You know, we just had someone here from a medical practice, and they're looking for backup software. The advantage to something like RAID over backup software is that when you have a failure, a backup will take hours to restore. It doesn't always have all the permissions, it doesn't always have all the metadata, and it's a process that you're shut down in the meantime. Isn't it better to just have a dialog box, you click OK and keep on working?
So I want to make sure we get this. This is a mirroring solution, not a striping solution.
It has both, and you can have both on the same disks. So one of the benefits is if you're a photographer, you can set up a 30 gigabyte Photoshop scratch disk in the beginning of the drives and mirror the rest of them. So all your Photoshop scratch activity happens very quickly on the scratch disk, and yet if a disk fails, all you lose is your scratch disk.
So do I have to have disks of the same size and to match? Because the comment about the Photoshop scratch disk has me confused a little.
Okay, no, you don't have to have disks of the same size, nor do they have to be of the same type. So you can take any two disks. You're limited in a mirror by the smaller of the two disks. So if you have, say, a laptop that has an internal 160 and you buy a 500 gigabyte external, you mirror to it and you'll have a 160 gigabyte volume that of the external drive, 160 gigabytes will be taken up by the mirror volume that's invisible. You can then create another volume of 300 gigabytes you mount on your desktop used for non-critical, mission critical data.
Is that something SoftRAID does automatically, or do I have to set that up with disk utility first and then plug it in and configure SoftRAID?
No, you use SoftRAID to do all your disk management. One of the nice things we added in SoftRAID is the ability to actually take a disk and convert it to SoftRAID from disk utility or to disk utility from SoftRAID. So as an example, I have a laptop, it's already running, I don't want to have to back up the entire thing and restore, go through 5-6 hours just to run SoftRAID. Instead, I'll boot from another disk, convert my laptop disk to SoftRAID, restart, and then I'll convert it to a mirror, and this all happens then in the background. And if you're, for instance, having trouble or you think SoftRAID may be causing a problem, you can convert the disk to Apple format. Oh, the problem's still there. Okay, I don't have to worry about SoftRAID.
This sounds like a great solution, someone who wants to get in and experiment a little bit with RAID, with mirroring and striping, and has some hard drives laying around, but maybe doesn't want to invest in all the dedicated hardware just yet.
One of the tricks with dedicated hardware is that if your needs are high and you have the budget to invest in a high-end hardware RAID, it's obviously clearly superior to a software solution. When you're dealing with what's called budget hardware RAID, where you're talking a solution in the hundreds of dollars to maybe a couple $1,000s, they're not that robust. You still have to have very good backup solutions because you're adding something which I'll call points of failure. So, give you an example. There were drive vendors once upon a time that were making FireWire enclosures that had 4 disks in them that were very large capacity, terabyte for instance, when the largest disk you could buy was 250 gigabytes. Users gobble them up because I've got a terabyte disk drive. What they didn't realize is that that box has 5 points of failure. 4 drives plus an interface board to manage that RAID. So if any of those 5 fails, you lose 100% of your data. So obviously you're increasing your risk of data loss by 5 times. So the concept of RAID is to make that less than 1, to make it like 0.99999%, I will never lose data.
It sounds like it's relatively easy to set up, and it's just something that I can start with this afternoon if I buy it.
It actually is. You can get running in 5 minutes. And there's one feature we're adding with SoftRAID 4, which will be out in about 60 days, is something we call fast mirror rebuilds. And there's never been anything like this in Mac, PC, Unix world. It's totally phenomenal. The idea is that I have a 1 terabyte volume. Okay, 2 huge disks. My photo Aperture library is on there, which is 700-800 gigabytes of sorted data. In Aperture, if I change 1 file, I add 1 image, to back it up, you have to back up the entire 700 gigabytes. It's a nightmare. So now I take this 1 terabyte volume with SoftRAID, take 1 disk, take it off-site, bring it back in. The library has changed, but we have journaled what's changed on the disk. The rebuild will take a couple of minutes. So you can do mirror rebuilds in absolute minutes, and it's just a stunning revolution for RAID. So it just changes the metaphor. You no longer have to take 8-10 hours to do a backup.
In talking about the mixed drive sizes, I'll ask also about mixed interfaces. Does it matter whether I'm USB 2, FireWire 400, 800, whatever, or does SoftRAID just see a mounted drive and that's how it handles it?
Yeah, it just sees the drive. So what happens a lot of times is I have a FireWire enclosure, the bridge fails, I can take it out of the box, connect it up to SATA, and I'm still running. So SoftRAID doesn't care what the disk type is or if it moves from one bus to another.
Makes perfect sense, and sounds like
How it ought to work.
how it ought to work. How much do I pay for how it ought to work?
It's $129.
Wow, that's great. That's very reasonable, especially if you have some older drives laying around, and again, you want to start getting into this mindset and experimenting with it and what it means.
Exactly. And one of the other things is that it actually supplements Time Machine rather than replaces it. Time Machine serves a function where I need to go back in time and get a file that I deleted. But it's terrible for getting your data back because the process of backing up and restoring takes so long. You also need to shut everything down when you're backing up or it'll skip that archive. You can't use it for large databases, but I often need to go back in time. So SoftRAID is something for real-time data backup, Time Machine and other backup products, or for integrative or short-term solutions, I need a few files.
Perfect, perfect. The website to find out more about SoftRAID is?
SoftRAID.com, SoftRAID.
Perfect. Mark, thank you very much. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
I'm Chuck Joyner, and this has been a discussion about SoftRAID at Macworld Conference and Expo. We'll be back again soon with more MacVoices TV. Thanks for listening. MacVoices TV is brought to you by Tropical Software, the makers of Top 10 Notes. Check it out at tropic4.com. MacVoices TV is part of the MacVoices Group and a member of Mac Level 10.